All right, now let's get to the meat of the topic. Should you get a patent? There's going to be a couple factors I'm going to be going through, and all of them should inform you as to whether you should get a patent, how many patents you should get. Consider the industry that you're in. Are you in the pharmaceutical, hardware, or software industry? And I'm going to go over each of these in a little bit more detail to give some color. Um, but uh, but basically, it's most important to get a patent if you're in the farm industry, and least important to have patents if you're in the software industry. So let's consider the pharmaceutical industry. Patents here are heavily relied upon and are extremely valuable. Every day in the patent's lifetime is potentially worth millions of dollars. So you can imagine a drug, and let's say it's an FDA approved drug, and your patent covers that set of active ingredients. No other company is allowed to sell a drug without those active ingredients, and therefore, if you have a patent on that, it's extremely valuable. Companies won't be able to design around that, and therefore, patents are the lifeblood of a lot of these companies. Now, in the hardware industry and software industry, it's a little bit different because there are a lot more design arounds than in the pharma industry. In the hardware industry, if you're operating in the US, I would say it's quite important to have patents because the courts here generally enforce your IP quite strongly. The tricky part is if you outsource a lot of your hardware efforts to places like China or governments where they don't exactly enforce IP as well as the US. And in those cases, you may not necessarily want to invest too much in patents as a primary part of your strategy because of the remedies that you get from the courts. So in China, um, it's kind of lax and kind of well known actually that factories can steal very popular hardware and make copycats. And even if you had a patent, it is costly to enforce. And also, even if you do, the injunction may not actually stop others from operating. So if you get an injunction against one person, they might just end that business and then start another business. And it's kind of a whack-a-mole kind of situation. So in software, it's less important to have patents, but they are still quite useful when telling a story to investors about your commitment to protecting your IP. And I will have to say that if you're in the finance or human operations space, there's it's important to have patents, but do not invest a lot in them because courts have traditionally not allowed patents in those spaces to be valid and granted. So you'll have a lot of, it'll cost a lot to get a patent and you can't really use them anyway if you got it. So just be mindful of that. So in summary, consider your industry. Patents are more of a competitive advantage in pharma, less so in hardware, and even less in software. But they should not be completely ignored because there are certain time windows within which you have to act on your IP to get it for use in certain business outcomes like investment, sale, etc. The other factor to consider is detectability. What detectability is how easy is it for competitors to reverse engineer your product. Highly detectable ideas are more valuable than low detectable ideas for patents because highly detectable ideas are more easily asserted. Because in court, you have to prove the other side is acting in a certain way, and low detectable patents, it's much harder to reach that threshold. So if you have a very non-detectable invention, let's say it's how you train an AI model, that's really low detectability, you might want to just keep that trade secret because if you file a patent for it, you'll have to basically share with the world exactly how you do this, and also they cost a ton of money. But if you keep a trade secret, um, others won't really know how you do it, and it can be a competitive advantage. But with that said, sometimes it doesn't, if something is undetectable, it doesn't mean you shouldn't file for a patent, because although it's difficult to use in court, it's still, having a patent on something is still useful for your perception of your company when you raise money or when you sell the company. And another thing to consider is your market size. If your company isn't that big, and I kind of use $100 million based off my experience of seeing companies, small companies to large companies, and see when patents kind of affect their business. If it's not a big company, I would just say don't bother with patents. It's not worth your time, and that's probably the biggest question to consider.